Judge Roy Moore loses to Doug Jones by 0.5%. And now the GOP, the grand old party, the Republican machine, is blaming Steve Bannon. We're going to talk about this. And I'm going to tell you a story out of history that's going to blow your mind. I'm Randall Terry. This is Voice of Resistance. Welcome to the program, friend. I am deeply grieved over the defeat of Judge Roy Moore for the Alabama Senate seat. And we're going to come back to that in this story. I think that he could have won. I think that he should have won. And I think that one of the reasons he didn't win was because elements of the Republican machine wanted him to lose. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because I was watching the news and thinking of you, my friends and my viewers, and what I would say. And I read a lot, both fiction and nonfiction. And a story from World War II that most people probably don't know came to my mind, and I want to share it with you. And I want you to just think this one through with me, okay? So as you know, World War II, we were fighting the Nazis. The Allies were fighting the Nazis. And behind enemy lines were concentration camps. And one of the lesser-known camps was Dusiplesky. And the Allies, who had incredible machinery, because as the war went on, our planes and our tanks got better and better. The Germans had a clear edge at the beginning of the war, and they maintained one at some levels right up to the end. I don't know if you know this, but the Germans developed the jet fighter. And if they had developed it maybe 6 months sooner, they probably would have either won the war or had a stalemate. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So the Americans just had overwhelming numbers of planes, tanks, and troops. So with the Battle of the Bulge, there was a chance that the movement forward of the Allied advance was going to be stopped. What a lot of people don't know in this story is that there was an advance group of Allies. They were Americans, and I don't remember the name of the general. It'll come to me, who was leading the forces. But they got to Camp Dusiplesky first, right? Because they had really good soldiers, and they had foot soldiers, and they had really good machinery. But the commanding general of the American troops personally knew, because remember, there were people who were friends, relatives before the war. There was a lot of people in America that were pro-German and didn't want us to go to war with Germany. And as it turns out, as freaky as it is, when they got to the camp, the leader of the camp, they were distant relatives. They had known each other when they were children. And so they parlayed, and as it came out, when they were beginning to discuss, because they had the concentration camp, they had Jews there, they had gypsies, they had all kinds of Christian prisoners. And long story short is that the leader of the concentration camp was able to convince the leader of the American troops to park there and to not use force and to shut up shop. And it gets even sicker because there was so much money being made in the concentration camp. You have to remember something, that the concentration camps, besides being extermination camps, some of them were far more of a work camp. And they were making armaments. They were making things that were for the war. They were making clothing items, right? And there was a lot of gold. They would take the gold fillings and gold items from the various victims that were brought to Dusiplesky, and he was able to convince the American leader, don't shut us down. I'll cut you in on it. And so they literally set up camp there. And the general for the Americans came and went. He literally would come and meet with the leader, the commandant of the camp. And they got involved in the smuggling, they got involved in the black market because there was a lot of money to be made. I mean, this happened, you know, this should not be a surprise. This happened in the Civil War here in America. All right, this was, you know, there's money to be made with war from Gone with the Wind. There's money to be made. So they literally set up camp and allowed the concentration camp to keep going. They looked the other way while the Jews were being killed. And I've got to take a break. All right, hold on. I've got to take a break. Don't go away. This story is going to blow your mind. Please stay with me. Welcome back, friend. So the Americans, and by the way, we checked off air, and the name of the general was Compromiso, maybe Italian, maybe Spanish, I don't know, Portuguese. So he's now working with the Nazi commandant because there's a money flow. There's stuff being made in the concentration camp. There's money to be made, and they're selling things on the black market. You have to remember that there were certain plants in Germany. For those of you who think this is bizarre, there were plants in Germany that were deliberately not bombed because of American money interests that had financial stakes in those plants. So this should not surprise anyone that this kind of treachery went on. So the American troops are there, and a lot of the underlings, you know, the foot soldiers, they're not really sure what's going on, but they can't fully understand, why are we here? Why are we not advancing? Why is the smoke still coming out of the smokestacks? Why are we still seeing German trucks come and go? There's no fighting going on. There's no shooting. And meanwhile, the American general and the commandant of the Nazis, they're in full swing, all right? This went on for several weeks. It bled into months. And the American general was making serious money. Serious money. And so were those that were immediately around him, all right? The general staff, his adjutants, some of the high-ranking officers. Serious money. And the Nazis who were running the concentration camp, same thing. They had now found protectors. They had found people who had a common interest in money. And, you know, there was, I have to imagine, I don't know, but there had to be some distaste with some of the officers at what the Germans were doing to the people in the concentration camp, in the work camp. But they let it go on. So then, after the Battle of the Bulge, and then the Allied forces made their move back, then more troops started to come. And as the troops approached Camp Dusseplesky, I'm sorry, I always say it wrong, Dusseplesky, as the Allies advanced, the Americans who were there at the concentration camp, at the work camp, with General Compromiso, they actually allowed the Germans to regroup behind the line and to fight the Americans and the Allies. And the first wave was repulsed. The Americans lost the battle, an enormous expenditure of blood and treasure. And they lost, and the camp was still running. At this point, the American general and the German commandant, they think, you know, we don't know how this is going to go. There was still hopes at that point that the Germans would win the war. And by winning the war, it didn't mean that they were going to invade America. It just meant that they were going to come to a ceasefire, a stalemate, so that they could continue to operate, or rather occupy France. They could continue to occupy Poland. They could continue to occupy the lowlands, Belgium, Holland, etc. And that they would just have a ceasefire, and then they would keep these concentration camps, these work camps, running in full vigor. They'd keep killing the Jews, they'd keep killing the gypsies, they would kill the Christians that ran their mouth too much, and they would keep making things. Because again, some of these concentration camps tended more towards killing, some of them had killing and a lot of labor going on. All of them had some level of labor. So they were called labor relocation camps. So when the first American wave was defeated, the American general who had been in contact, you know, by radio, been in contact with the Allied commanders back in London, saying, we've got a beachhead here, we're established, we're holding our ground. They're making it sound like they had come to a place where they were occupying enemy territory, but they couldn't go any further and send in reinforcements. So that finally, when the Battle of Bulge was over and all these American and Allied people came in, they stood down, basically. They allowed the Germans to regroup and to fight their own brothers in arms, because this general and his immediate staff were making so much money off of the prison work camp that they literally stood down, because they still didn't know which way the war would go. And then what happened next, the gall of what happened, they blamed the American generals who were leading, and the colonels who were leading this charge, the one that was repulsed. So you got the treacherous general here working with the head of the concentration camp. More Allied troops are coming. This bad general allows these guys to regroup and to fight, and they repulse the attack. And then this guy wires back and says, it's the fault of these generals. They didn't attack properly. They didn't execute the mission properly. He's blaming the guys who were attacking. And he was in cahoots with the Nazis. I've got to take a break. I'll tell you how this story ended when we come back. Don't go away. So, just so you get the full picture, the horror of what is going on in this story. Germans are killing people in the concentration camp. The American General Compromiso, he's working with them. And they're all making money. The leaders of the work camp and the commandant and the American general and his immediate staff, they're making money. They're making serious money with black market goods that are being manufactured in this concentration camp. And when the Allies finally take care of the Battle of the Bulge and they regroup and they're coming, and this general's saying, hey, come on, yeah, we've got a beachhead established here. You can come, you can win. They stand down and they aid and abet the enemy so that the Germans can repulse the fight, thinking that, hey, we can still control this. We can, you know, there's money to be made here. When off the air, I checked the name of one of the generals that was approaching, one of the good generals who was approaching. His name was General Bannon. You might recognize the name, Steve Bannon. Now, early on, I told you this was a story. This is all completely made up, but I want you to check your temperature, how disgusted you feel. Camp Dupliciteschi, it's duplicitous, okay? General Compromiso, he's a compromiser. So what we have in American politics right now, what has happened just now with the election or the defeat of Judge Moore, we have, and this has been going on now for 6 or 8 years, we have Mitch McConnell and leaders of the Senate, John McCain, Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, John Boehner before him, the Speaker of the House. These are the generals and the general staff that got to the edge of the concentration camp and cut a deal. And it's the Republican wonks, the policy wonks that are making money. They're the immediate staff. You guys know who you are. Some of you used to be friends of mine. And you cut a deal with the devil. You cut a deal with Satan and baby killers and homosexual marriage militants, people whose hands are drenched with blood. They said if we take the House, we'll defund Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is the Nazi concentration camp, okay? Planned Parenthood has killed more babies than the Nazis killed with killing Jews. You understand that? Just think of the gravity of what I just told you. In America, in the land of the free, in the home of the brave, Planned Parenthood, under the color of law, with the protection of Mitch McConnell and John Boehner and Paul Ryan, never mind Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama. Don't mention their names as if they're the villains. They're the ones who ran the concentration camp. They're the ones who were the baby killers. They're the commandants, okay? They're the ones controlling the machinery that kills the Jews and makes the money. And up comes Mitch McConnell. Up comes Paul Ryan, John Boehner. Up comes John McCain, the treacherous. And they cut a deal. And all of their little policy wonks who want the machine to keep going because there's money there. And then along comes General Bannon. He intends to destroy the concentration camp. He intends to obliterate them politically. And the Mitch McConnells and the John Boehners go, whoa, 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 whoa. We've got a vested interest in this machine continuing to run without a lot of disruption. And the Republican machinery, the policy wonks, the people who are the ones who run campaigns, the campaign consultants, the ones who write the press releases, and the campaign managers, they're a subclass making millions of dollars, okay? And they're the ones crafting the messages that General Compromiso sends back to the London base and to the troops saying, we're taking ground. We've got a beachhead established. We've got a beachhead established, and the Nazis are terrified, and the concentration camp is within our sights. They're sending these press releases back, these messages back, while they're having drinks, while they're having beers with the baby killers, while they're having beers and helping the people who want to destroy General Bannon. And so now the new narrative is that Bannon cost the Republicans the seat. It's Bannon's fault. It's the general's fault who came up. And when Mitch McConnell stood down and John Boehner and the leaders of the Republican establishment did everything in their power to establish a coalition with baby killers, okay, murderers. And then they want to blame Bannon. Then they want to say it's our fault, the people who are marching with Bannon, the people who want to destroy the Nazis, okay? I don't want a place at the table with Planned Parenthood. I want to see Planned Parenthood executives in prison, all right? Baby killing is a crime against God. It is murder. I don't want a place at the table with Planned Parenthood. I want their table destroyed and turned into firewood. And I want Planned Parenthood obliterated from the face of the earth. Just like the Nazis were obliterated from the face of the earth. That's the mission. And General Compromiso, Mitch McConnell, John Boehner, all these people, and the Republican policy wonks and the people that are making money off of campaigns, friends, they're the ones who are the collaborators with the Nazis. They are collaborating because they want the status quo, because there's money. And there's money to be made while they fake us out about their big attack on Camp Duplicitus. I'll take a break. I'll be right back. It doesn't matter what you think about Judge Moore. It doesn't matter what I think about him. What I can tell you is that this election was about policy and principle. They would have come after Judge Moore with everything they had, no matter what. Like they've come after everyone in these special elections since the election of President Trump. And the baby killers, the Democrat machine and the baby killers that are the political consultants on both sides of the political spectrum, Democrat and Republican, they hate Judge Moore because he's a man of principle, because of what he stood for with the Ten Commandments, what he stood for against homosexual marriage. They hate him. And what Donald Trump did was he took down a cartel and a dynasty. He took down the Clinton cartel and he took down the Bush dynasty. And in so doing, he all but bankrupted certain players, or at least he put them into political exile, okay? There was a stable of people, a massive brigade of political moneyed people, the consultants, the campaign managers, the press writers, the media specialists, who were salivating to have Jeb Bush or one of the establishment guys in office because it meant money for them. Trump took that all away, and he kept a list of who betrayed him, who fought against him. And now these people are out in the cold. And so what they needed was this. They needed this. And they're not able to send out fundraising letters. The Democrats are raising a ton of money against Trump and against Moore. But the Republican insiders in D.C., they can't mail to their donor base and say, send us money to stop Donald Trump, their donors won't give. So they're going to really rich, moneyed people who hate Trump, and they're saying, I need you to write me a $100,000 check, I need a $500,000 check, I need $1 million check, so that we can do everything in our power to help the Democrats stop Trump and get things back to the way they were, get the concentration camp running with the approval of the American general. That's what this is about, people. Who do you hate more? Who do you despise more, Judas or Pilate? General Cornwallis or General Benedict Arnold? Most people don't even know who Cornwallis was. But we know who Benedict Arnold was. We know who Judas was. And it's the Judases, friends, that are in charge of a big portion of the Republican establishment and all of their adjutants and all of their officers and all of their fundraisers and all their managers and all their hangers-on. It's about money, not about life and liberty and justice and principle.